Analilia.
Hello and welcome to the first debate of the special election for New Jersey's 11th congressional district between Republican Joe Hathaway and Democrat Analilia Mejia, brought to you by the New Jersey Globe and Rider University. Voters in the 11th district are voting on the successor to Governor Michah Rasmussen. Election day is on April 16th. Early in-person voting will be from April 6th to April 14th, and mail-in ballots have been sent to voters who requested them. I am Joey Fox, congressional reporter for the New Jersey Globe. Joining me today are Michah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovich Institute of New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and Jeannine LaRue, civil rights leader and political strategist. We are back to a virtual format for this debate due to time constraints, but we plan on bringing you more in-person debates in the future. Thank you, as always, to C-SPAN for airing this debate. A brief recap of the rules: candidates will get 90 seconds to make opening statements, after which myself, Michah, and Jeannine will begin asking a series of questions on state and national topics. Both candidates will get 60 seconds to respond to each question. We may allow for some back and forth beyond that, especially if one candidate is attacked. We'll also have one section in which each candidate is given the opportunity to ask the other a question. At the end of the debate, which will run for a little over an hour, each candidate will give a 90-second closing statement. Now let's get into the debate. Mr. Hathaway won a coin toss prior to the start of the debate and has opted for his opening statement to come second. So Ms. Mejia, your opening statement.
Greetings and good evening. My name is Analilia Mejia, and I am an organizer, a policy advocate, and I'm running for Congress because, like you, I am tired of this political madness, and I know that we can do better. For 25 years, I've worked behind the scenes on behalf of working families like yours, raising the minimum wage, fighting for tax fairness, protecting your vote. I've dedicated my career to this because I know that good policy transforms lives. My own life is a testament to this. Tonight, you will hear a debate between myself, a union and community organizer with a track record of looking out for the little guy, and my opponent, a 3-time Trump supporter who derides any idea that helps people as radical, and will vote in lockstep with the very same people who are making your daily life increasingly unaffordable and have thrown us into a reckless war. He will say your healthcare isn't worth funding. I believe it's a human right. He won't uphold international human rights or laws. I say it protects us all. He will try to paint a picture of moderation and perhaps even try to distance himself. But every time Joe Hathaway tries to sell you this new version of moderation, I want you to remember, Joe Hathaway voted for Donald Trump 3 times, and he wants you to send him to Congress so he could vote with him every single day. I urge you to instead send me, Analilia Mejia, an organizer, a bold leader, a woman with integrity who will fight for you and working families, middle-class families across New Jersey's 11th congressional district. I'm glad to be with you tonight.
Great. And Mr. Hathaway, your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Joey. Thank you to the New Jersey Globe. Ms. Mejia, thank you for participating, and happy Passover, everyone. To all the viewers watching tonight, I'm very excited to share with all of you my vision for the future of our district and for our country. And for me, it's one that's grounded both in my roles as a mayor and councilman, but also in my role as a young dad. Because look, we all know New Jersey has some serious issues, but if we're going to fix them, we need to send someone to Washington who has common sense, practical solutions, and independent leadership to improve our quality of life. Now, that's exactly what I've been able to do as a mayor. I've worked to solve some of the biggest challenges facing all of our communities, one of which being high-density housing. Last year, I was able to work with Democrats down in Trenton and Republicans at the local level to reduce our obligation by 92%. And that has a real impact. It helped protect our roads, it helps support our first responders, and it helps save our school system all at the same time. That's the kind of results-oriented leadership I think we need in Washington. That's why my plan calls for things like a tax freeze for first-time home buyers, investing in vocational training to drive our economy, and expanding a child care tax credit to help working families that are just trying to make ends meet. Again, common sense ideas, practical solutions. Unfortunately, that is the exact opposite of my opponent's platform. Ms. Mejia's policies, as you'll soon see, are completely out of touch with everyday people in this district, and her vision for our future is one that will leave us less safe, less affordable, and demonize thousands of members of our Jewish community. For voters tonight, I believe this is a very simple choice, one of practical leadership or radical socialism for the future of our district. I'm looking forward to tonight's debate, and I look forward to earning your vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. And with that, we will launch into our questions. Once again, we will ask questions of individual candidates, but both candidates will get an equal chance to respond to every question. So I'm going to start on a topic that I think every politician in America is talking about, at least to some extent right now, which is affordability. And I'll start with Mr. Hathaway for the first question. Everyone in America says that affordability and the rising cost of living is a top issue for them. Members of the party currently control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Do you believe Republicans have made life more affordable?
Well, I think so, but I think we have a long way to go here in New Jersey, right? I mean, New Jersey has been unaffordable for a long time. And like you said, politicians have been running on this issue here for quite some time. I think in order for us to make life more affordable here, it has to start with lowering costs. That's why just about everything in our platform is about lowering the role of government, lowering taxes to help make life more affordable. And I think you've seen some things do that. And I think you're going to see on tax day, right, when things like the SALT deduction, like no taxes on Social Security and tips, when those come into play and hit people's pockets, that's going to be a good thing for our district. What we don't need right now when it comes to affordability are platforms and ideas like socialized medicine and socialized education that is going to raise spending by trillions and trillions of dollars, which is what Ms. Mejia's platform will do to working families in our district. Our families will be footing the bill for those tax increases here in New Jersey 11. That is what I mean when I say she is out of touch and has radical platforms that we cannot afford in New Jersey.
Ms. Mejia?
Okay, well, y'all, it starts early, playing it fast and loose with the facts. Here's the truth. Your healthcare costs are up 174% because Republicans repealed the ACA tax credits. Your energy costs are up by 6% because Republicans cut energy tax credits. Your housing costs are up by 5%. Actually, rental costs are up by 5%. New construction is up by 17,000. Why? Because Republicans throw around tariffs like Mardi Gras beads or jack up prices or allow monopolies to happen, and you pay the price. My opponent will speak a nice game about affordability, but in fact, Republicans like himself and Donald Trump have been driving your economic instability, and you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to your pocket, listen to your credit card bills, listen to the fact that you have to draw money out of your home equity. He speaks of SALT tax deduction. He speaks of some tax breaks from the Republican Party, but here's the trick. They made them temporary. They actually temporarily help you in the moment, but then they get faded out right after this upcoming midterm election. That kind of cynicism and political games are what's wrong with our political system. And Joe Hathaway will just be more of the same.
So I want to have some room for back and forth here, but I'm going to stay on this topic with the next question. So I think we'll have the time for that. I mean, this one is for you, Ms. Mejia. Democrats don't control Washington right now, but there's a good chance that they'll retake one or both chambers of Congress in this year's midterm elections. Do you believe that Democratic leaders like Hakeem Jeffries, potential next House Speaker, Chuck Schumer, potential next Senate Majority Leader, do you think that they have articulated a plan to make life more affordable?
I think the American people are articulating the plan they want that will make their lives more affordable. The American people have been clamoring for reinstating the ACA tax credits because they know that it made their life more affordable and their health care attainable. I think the American people really want energy tax credits because they know that it is impossible to make ends meet with your utility costs going through sky high and through the roof. I think the American people are disgusted in spending $1 billion on an illegal war and driving up their gasoline prices 50%. And so again, what we need is, my opponent is correct. We need common sense solutions, but Republicans haven't been driving this. The American people need real leaders who are not going to be beholden to lobbyists, who are not going to kowtow to Donald Trump, who are going to be focused on the daily lives of working class and middle class families, like those that I know in New Jersey's 11th congressional district, who are finding themselves struggling. They did all the right things. They bought a home, they went to college, and now they find themselves struggling because they have Republican leaders who in 1 year have tanked this economy and hurt their pockets.
Mr. Hathaway?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, the fact is that Republicans passed the largest tax cut in American history. And every single Democrat in Washington, including Ms. Mejia's squad endorsers who are backing the far left candidates that are running across the country, voted against it. This was the biggest tax cut for all Americans. It increased the child tax credit for young families. It put money back in pockets of waitresses and senior citizens. So, when she talks about the Democrats coming in to cut taxes and lower costs, they've done the complete opposite. And I will say some of the things she mentioned, like ACA subsidies and tariffs, are areas where I disagree with the president, where I may disagree with some members of my party. But the most important thing is that whoever goes down to Washington is doing what's right for the district. Extending the ACA subsidies would lower costs for seniors here in our district. Taking a more scalpel approach to taxes would support small businesses and stabilize prices for businesses in our community. When I go to Washington to serve the people, that is what I intend to do. I'm not going down to be a rubber stamp for my party or for any president or for any squad. It's about putting the people of the district first. I've done it as mayor. I'll do it for the people of CD11.
So, Mr. Hathaway, I do have a quick follow-up on that, and I'll maybe give you 30 seconds to answer this rather than a full minute. You sort of say that you have maybe some differences with your party. You wouldn't be a rubber stamp for your party. Would it be your intention to support Mike Johnson to continue on as House Speaker?
Well, look, I think the Speaker of the House, any leadership roles are incredibly difficult. I certainly don't envy any of our leadership down there. But listen, what I got to say is, look, when you're a leader, you have to be judged on your results. I certainly don't agree with everything Mike Johnson's done or everything he stands for, but that doesn't mean the results aren't there for the American people. We've seen things like border security. We've seen things, again, like affordability through the working family tax cut. These are things that I support. If they're good for the people of New Jersey, then they're good for me.
So that you would say, yes, you would support him again?
Yeah, look, I think the results that he's gotten done for our district are the right thing. We don't have to agree on every single thing. And that's the big difference here between Ms. Mejia and I. She runs on a platform, literally, of any old blue won't do. She's not only unwilling to come across the aisle and work with Republicans, she won't work with moderates in her own party if they don't support her radical vision for the future. We have to get back to a place where we can come to the middle. No, we're not going to agree on everything, but support people who are doing a good job and doing good things for our district. That's the job.
Ms. Mejia, I'll let you respond to that, but I'll also ask you the equivalent question, which is, would it be your intention to support Hakeem Jeffries as the next Speaker of the House?
It is my intention to support a leader that is going to fight for working class families. And let me say this, my opponent loves to throw around accusations just so that he could deflect from the facts. Y'all, the Republican Party moved the largest wealth transfer in history, giving the very top 1% $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, gutting Medicaid, which families with special needs children or families who have parents with dementia rely upon. They did all of this in order to be able to enrich their buddies and their cronies. And for the working class, middle class families that my opponent now talks about, peanuts. They gave us temporary tax cuts. Those tax cuts that my opponent mentioned, they fade out in 2028, in 2027. They will not help us in the long run. But those tax cuts to billionaires, those tax cuts to corporations, those $3 trillion added to deficits just so that we can enrich more billionaires across the United States, those are permanent, and those are going to hurt not only you, but your families. Don't fall for the wolf in sheep's clothing in this moment. He will talk a good game, but his actions actually speak the truth. Three-time Trump supporter will support Mike Johnson and will continue to fail you.
So, I mean, you said that the kind of leader that you do want to see, is that leader Hakeem Jeffries? Does he meet those qualifications that you laid out?
I think Leader Jeffries has taken a bold stance on making sure that we fight DHS and stop the terror that ICE is running across our communities. I think that he can be a bold leader that will stand up for working families. But the bottom line here is that it's not politics as usual. I want to speak to the listeners who are concerned about their daily well-being.
I might have to cut you off there.
It's hurting because of Republican policies.
Okay. So we are going to move on from this topic, although we will definitely talk about affordability plenty more today. And I'll switch over to Micah to ask his questions.
Thank you. Ms. Mejia, you proposed to abolish ICE and replace it with more judges and an investment in the early part of the immigration system. But judges don't have the ability to enforce either the laws or their own decisions. Without ICE, what law enforcement authority will enforce the nation's immigration laws?
Well, I will remind you that for it's only been 22 years since we've had ICE in its current formation. We can, in fact, protect our borders. We can, in fact, protect our security and not shoot Americans in the streets like we have in Minnesota. The truth is that our immigration system is very much broken. But ICE, we cannot nibble around the edges to fix a system that is broken on so many levels. It has a recruitment problem. It has an accountability problem. It has a training problem. It has an oversight problem. Instead of nibbling around the edges, what we should do is invest in a system that works for everyone. Judges, more security, the use of data that doesn't infringe upon your rights, and most importantly, we don't need armed thugs running around our streets shooting American people just for exercising their First Amendment rights. This is not logical. And for everyone listening, you know that this is not the America that we wish to live in or raise our children in.
Mr. Hathaway?
So just to follow up, and I want to give Mr. Hathaway the time to respond, but who should enforce the laws?
I believe the United States has oversight on our immigration policy and should continue to do so. But we shouldn't militarize our police because we create other problems. For example, immigrants are then afraid to report crimes, and that leads to greater insecurity. We shouldn't have armed thugs that have such immunity that they act with impunity, shooting American people. We need to have the kind of system that we have had in the past, where you have border enforcement and you have a system that actually allows people to integrate into our society instead of trafficking in hate and violence, which again, everyone listening knows this is not the America that we want to live in. We want to have a free nation, a protected nation, a nation with the rule of law. But what is happening now runs against our own morals and values, and we have to stop. We can admit it.
Mr. Hathaway?
Well, I think Ms. Mejia is unable to answer the simple question of who should enforce the laws, because I don't think
I, in fact, said the U.S. government has oversight. Go ahead.
Ms. Mejia, okay. I didn't interrupt you while you were speaking. I'd appreciate the same respect.
You misrepresented what I said. I would appreciate if you
Ms.
didn't.
Mejia, I'm about to talk about the facts of this race. I know you have avoided the last 5 debates because you don't want me to share the facts. I'm going to do that. I'd appreciate the same respect I've given to you that you would give to me. So I don't know if I can start that over, but Ms. Mejia can't answer who should be enforcing the law because I don't think she thinks anybody actually should be enforcing the law. Because when she was the leader of the Working Families Party, this is an organization that has vehemently supported defund police measures. They've hosted webinars on how to defund police. And those things will leave our district terribly unsafe. Young families don't come to this district because they want to defund police. We want to support our local law enforcement. Now, let me take a step back to this ICE issue because I think this is one, again, we can't rule with ideology. We have to rule with practicality. We have to come to the table with ways to make ICE operate more effectively, right? Better training, better security, right? De-escalation techniques. These need to happen. And they'll be able to do their very important job much safer if we do. But we also need local law enforcement to be playing a role here. In New Jersey, with our sanctuary city laws, our local law enforcement can't even speak to federal agents or federal officers when they're going about their business. They can't say, hey, listen, when you go into that house, there's an older brother with autism. Be careful when you go in there, know what's going on. Our Democrats in this state have disallowed for that to happen. We have the resources to keep people safe and allow the federal government to do their job. It won't happen when we go with these defund police radical policies that are supported by my opponent.
If I may correct the record, Mr. Hathaway knows full and well that the programs he speaks of happened in an organization when I wasn't actually at the helm. Mr. Hathaway plays it fast and loose with the facts, and I think it's important to be able to challenge when there's misrepresentation. As I said, I believe the U.S. government has, in fact, oversight over immigration policy and border enforcement, and we should continue to do so. What I'm saying is maybe we shouldn't shouldn't shoot Americans in the street because they're exercising their First Amendment rights. Maybe we shouldn't have armed thugs that are not trained and are violent and are breaking windows and stealing children. Maybe we should have the kind of system that invests in smart solutions versus chaos. Again, if you're going to represent what I stand for, please speak truth, not lies.
Mr. Hathaway, a bill to fund and reopen the Department of Homeland Security, except for ICE, was approved unanimously by the Senate. Speaker Johnson didn't post it for a vote, but had it come up, would you have voted for it or for the temporary funding extension that the House did pass?
Well, listen, I want to go back to something here because Ms. Mejia talks about border enforcement. Well, she worked for President Biden, and we had the least amount of border security physically possible in this country. So again, we want to talk about who's shifting and dodging depending on the flavor of the week. Ms. Mejia worked for the Biden administration when our borders were the least secure they've ever possibly been. When we get to DHS, now look, this is a key opportunity for both sides to come together and get something critically important done. We need to fund DHS. We have to get TSA employees back up and running. We have to get things like FEMA and Secret Service and all of the other areas that fall underneath Homeland Security back up and running. It's too important. It's American lives on the line. That's the kind of leader I'm going to be. That is why I'm running as an independent leader to go to Washington to make sure we're doing the job that people send us down to do. We have to put political differences aside. We have to know we're not going to agree on everything. I'm not going to get everything I want. The other side's not going to get everything they want. But we have to do the job that the American people send us down to do, keep Americans safe, and get DHS funded again.
Ms. Mejia?
Well, I think quite simply, if we want to keep Americans safe, we should uphold the Constitution. We shouldn't allow for the dissolution of equal protection or due process. We shouldn't deny people their First Amendment rights. We shouldn't allow ICE and Border Protection to collect your DNA samples or your images or your data and do who knows what with it. The bottom line is that we could have bipartisan immigration reform, but President Trump stopped it. And my opponent here, who supported him 3 times, who speaks a game about safety and rules and law, will just be another vote for this kind of chaos that is putting you in danger.
Mr. Hathaway, do you want to close us out on this section?
Yeah, well, sure. Look, I mean, I think when you talk about things like ICE, when you talk about things like getting DHS funded again, right? These are core responsibilities of Congress to come together and to get things done. As you can hear, Ms. Mejia has no intention of governing anywhere near the middle. She was endorsed by every member of the squad. That is who she is going to adhere to when she goes down to Washington. People need common sense, practical leadership in the middle to get these things done. By the way, that's something that her own party wants. That's why we've seen 3 local Democrats come over and more coming over every single day to actually endorse us as the candidate of choice in this race. Because even moderate Democrats and Republicans and independents know that we can't get anywhere in Washington by continuing to yell at the top of our lungs and just try to fight. How about we send someone down to Washington to actually work for once?
Right. Jeannine, you're up.
Yes, this is probably a good segue. We're talking around the whole issue of labels, and I just want to talk a little bit about labels. Mr. Hathaway, you have been pretty successful in framing your candidacy around local government devoid of national partisan politics. I have a couple of questions on that. First of all, would you identify yourself as MAGA?
Well, look, what I identify myself as is a new generation of Republican that we desperately need to go down and get things done for people. Look, I think the Republican Party is at its absolute best when it's in a big tent, right? When it gets back to our foundational principles of individual freedom, of supporting our business community and a thriving economy, border security, a strong military. That's what our Republican Party does well. I want to get back to a place where those are the most important things that we talk about and that we push for as leaders in our party. But listen, when you see what's going on in this race and what the options are and how far Ms. Mejia is willing to go to push a radical socialist economic agenda, that is why you are seeing Democrat after Democrat defect from this far left policy and come to the middle because people are tired of it. They're tired of far left rhetoric. They're tired of anti-Semitism. They're tired of socialism. That is where the Democrat Party is going. So in this race, if voters are someone who care about actually getting things done, about being a practical, independent leader to Washington, I'm the only choice they have in this race.
So I want to, before we do the follow-up with Ms. Mejia, I want to ask you, because you stepped right in it for me, is there a national policy issue where your personal conservative principles would take precedent over a bipartisan compromise?
Well, I mean, look, I think there's always going to be areas where we disagree. Look, I think when it comes to taxes being a really clear example, right? Spending. I mean, look, under Democrats in New Jersey, we've seen our budget here at the state level increase by almost double in the last 8 years under Democrat leadership. We need to get that under control. Again, that's why everything in my platform is about lowering costs. Putting in a tax freeze for first-time home buyers makes home ownership more affordable. Investing in vocational training, putting a cap on federal student loan interest, that makes education more affordable. Ms. Mejia's plans make everything less affordable. Socialized healthcare, federally government-controlled healthcare will raise spending by trillions. It will lessen patient access. It will stop innovative medicines from being produced here in America. It's going to be a disaster for people, everyday people in this district. So yeah, I think a lot of the conservative values when it comes to fiscal responsibility is something I adhere to closely. And I hope we can come to a bipartisan agreement there, but spending has to come down if we're ever going to get things better here in New Jersey and across the country.
Ms. Mejia?
I mean, first I want to address the fact that Mr. Hathaway continues to throw around accusations because he cannot actually stand for the policies that have made your pocket lighter, has made your daily existence harder. And he speaks of somehow magically being independent when he's voted for Donald Trump 3 times. Here is the bottom line. Your healthcare is higher because of Republican policies, and Joe Hathaway will do nothing about it. He will just side with the insurance companies who will deny you care and take all your premiums. He will stand here and say that he fights for housing affordability, and he sneaks in that he fought the construction of 95% of affordable housing in his town. That's not fighting for affordability. That's the opposite. This is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He will say whatever you want to hear. And this fear mongering, this idea that healthcare being a human right, ask any one of those 350,000 New Jerseyans who have lost their healthcare if they feel better with Republican policies. Ask them the thousands of people who have lost SNAP benefits, or families like mine who depend on Medicaid for care for my mother with dementia, who now is under threat because Republicans chose to give billionaires $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and gave
Guys, how
me
fast and loose are we going to play with this? What
Yeah,
we're
we're
going
gonna-
to guys? I mean, really, come on.
So we're going to move on to the
Hold on.
question.
I think I would like
Mr.
I would like a chance to respond to that. I don't know whether to take the healthcare or the affordable housing piece first, but look, on healthcare, we have a very clear plan for how to lower costs. It starts by increasing options, by creating more options for healthcare to lower costs and drive competition, right? That is how we lower costs in a capitalist society. What Ms. Mejia wants to do is create a single payer system, allow the government to decide who gets healthcare and who doesn't. Universal healthcare sounds really nice on the surface, but when you dig a level deeper in socialist economies, what it means is the government decides who gets that life-saving medicine and who doesn't. That is not the kind of America I want to live in. And Ms. Mejia's lack of understanding around how high-density housing works here in this district, it's why she stood by when the Working Families Party pushes for platforms like to eliminate.
So, Mr. Hathaway, we're going to have to ask you to wind it down a bit. We do have to move on to the next segment.
We can move on. Well, I'll just finish that thought. The Working Families Party pushes for the elimination of single-family zoning in places like CDLL.
Okay, we have to
Think
move
about
on.
that, guys.
We have to move on. So, Ms. Mejia, I also want to deal with labels as they relate to you. It's no secret that you're very progressive leaning, and this district that you're running in is pretty moderate. First of all, do you identify as socialist?
No, I'm a Democratic county committee woman for the last 13 years building my party. I also would say that I've lived in my town for 13 years and I talk to my neighbors, I talk to fellow moms, and I know how hard this economy is hitting middle-class families like mine. I know that people are pulling money from their home equity because they're finding it hard to make ends meet. I know that people are drowning in credit card debt. In the last year alone, their healthcare costs have skyrocketed, their energy energy costs have skyrocketed. Everything is more expensive because Republican policies have made it harder. How? Tariffs, cutting tax credits, giving tax breaks to billionaires, and then telling you that we can't afford healthcare. I won't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but I will fight for you to ensure that your families have a fighting chance. I know that this district is diverse. This district cares about people. We are not interested in just giving the top 0.1% yet another tax cut just to be able to say that we're going to take away food from school lunch programs or deny the elderly the health care that they need. That is unconscionable, and we are better than that.
So let me just follow up quickly on that. How would you describe the steps you would take to actually work with this divided Congress to really get things done?
I think we have to start with our own constituents. I think we need to listen to the concerns of people in New Jersey's 11th. I've spent months talking to folks about what are the things that they really care about. What they've said is, we want you to invest in the Gateway Tunnel and infrastructure and stop playing games like the Republicans have. We want you to cut our energy costs and don't let data centers get a better price just because they have a nice relationship with a Republican president or maybe Mr. Hathaway. They want us to be able to build affordable housing, to make rentals more affordable. My opponent only thinks about one group of people, but here are the truth. This district is very diverse. There are multiple socioeconomic communities, and we need to be able to address all of their needs. Mr. Hathaway only seems to care about the most well-connected, but the bottom line is, I've spent 25 years fighting for working families and middle-class families, and that's the fight I will take to Congress.
Thank you. And Mr. Hathaway, we're going to let you follow up on that as well.
Well, sure. I mean, Ms. Mejia doesn't want to say if she's a socialist or not, but I think the facts will show.
I said I'm not.
Indeed. I know, but you've been endorsed by every Democrat socialist, essentially in Congress. There's a reason why moderate Democrats are fleeing their campaign in droves and coming over to support our campaign. And when you push for policies that are socialist in nature, that in fact makes you a socialist in practice. Listen, I think we also have to look at, right, where is the backing for these campaigns coming from? Because that tells you a lot. Ms. Mejia herself has said, if you follow the money, you follow where a politician's heart is and where they're going to govern down in Washington. So when you look at the fact that Ms. Mejia's campaign is funded by someone like Yusra Hussein, a professor who said things like the Holocaust is the proud legacy of the state of Israel, or someone like Gregory Cesar, a defund police activist who dismantled police departments in Austin, Texas. When you have these far left progressives bankrolling her campaign, you know from her own words who she will support and who she will be advocating for and the policies she will be advocating for down in Washington. Not practicality, certainly nothing to make everyday life better here in New Jersey.
Thank you. So we're going to move to the next segment. Joey?
Ms. Mejia, I'll give you 15 seconds to respond since that was...
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if we're, first of all, again, playing it fast and loose with the facts, friends. My opponent is mentioning that who funds your campaign actually matters. Okay, 7,000 individual New Jerseyans and people across the country have contributed on average $57 because I won't take corporate PAC money. If we want to talk about the company we keep, think about the fact, again, he voted 3 times for Donald Trump and used to work for Chris Christie. I think the company he keeps means something. He takes pictures with insurrectionists. The bottom line is that he wants to throw around these accusations, but the truth is your pocketbook is telling you that Republican policies in the last year are costing you something. You send Joe Hathaway to Congress.
I'm going to cut you off there, Ms. Mejia. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We're going to move on.
Go ahead.
So our next set of questions is going to focus on foreign policy, which is something that I think is always important, obviously, but has taken on a particular importance in recent months and weeks under the Trump administration. So I'll start with Ms. Mejia on this first question on the issue of Israel. Many of your fellow progressive Democrats, including some in New Jersey, have described Israel's actions in Gaza as a genocide. Do you agree with that characterization?
Again, I think I've been very clear on my position here, and I understand that many individuals are feeling conflicted about what we are seeing in Gaza. But here is the bottom line. 80% of Gaza is in rubble. Can we agree that that is wrong? Can we agree that cutting the electricity to water desalination plants is not only wrong, but it goes against the Geneva Convention and it is a war crime? Can we agree that we can see that Benjamin Netanyahu is moving policies that actually undermine freedom and peace in the Middle East? The truth is that Gaza is under incredible pressure and driven by the policies of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I stand by the fact that I've called Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal. I believe that criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration is not anti-Israel any more than criticism of Donald Trump is anti-American. Neither man deserves a blank check or a blind eye when man, woman, and child, innocent civilians, are fair game to his destruction. We have to be able to tell our closest ally when a line has been crossed.
Mr. Hathaway?
Well, Ms. Mejia's position on the state of Israel and the Jewish community here in our district actually could not be more clear. It started in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, when just 72 hours after that massacre, she took to Twitter to blame Israel for the attacks by Hamas terrorists. Never once. It's absolutely true. It's right.
Not true.
She then, in this race, sat in a synagogue, raised her hand, and said that the idea of Jewish people existing in their ancestral homeland gives her incredible discomfort. She then put the icing on the cake as the only Democrat to raise her hand and answer your question, Joey, that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. These are positions that are radically out of touch with a district that has a thriving Jewish community that is made less safe, more dangerous by this extreme rhetoric. It has to stop. It's one thing to stand with our allies in Israel and to stand with our Jewish community, as I do, but we have to call out the normalization of this anti-Semitic rhetoric. It has to stop, and I won't stand for it or let it continue in this race.
So, Ms. Mejia, before you come in with a response, I'm going to stay on this topic, but I'm going to ask Mr. Hathaway the question first. You've said that you consider Israel a key ally. Do you think that there should be any conditions placed on the aid that the U.S. gives to Israel?
No, we don't condition aid for our allies. Israel is the lone democratic country surrounded by terrorists who would see it wiped off the face of the earth and would then turn and try to wipe America off the face of the earth. We have to stand hand in hand with them. And remember, when you spout this kind of rhetoric about the state of Israel, it impacts Jewish people here in our district. They feel less safe. They tell their children not to say, "You're Jewish, don't say that, someone could try to hurt us." The rhetoric has to stop. It has to stop here in this district. We cannot let it go further.
Again, my opponent is playing it fast and loose with the facts. He is trying to fearmonger and he's misrepresenting. It is, frankly, I would say it's laughable, except this is one of the most serious topics.
It's not laughable.
I will say that as a member of Congress, I would use every legislative power at my disposal to protect the rights of Jewish constituents and convene spaces to educate and to fight anti-Semitism because I know it's real. I am an Afro-Latina living in the United States. I know how dangerous othering is, but that doesn't mean that we cannot call the question on violations to international law and human rights. What my opponent is in fact telling you is that he is criticizing me for upholding international law. He is criticizing me for upholding the Geneva Convention. He is letting you know that he would allow Donald Trump to threaten the same, which he has to Iran, as he is telling you that he would allow Donald Trump to break international law, to wholesale punish every man, woman, and child, that he will, today it may be undocumented immigrants and Palestinians, but tomorrow it can be you because Joe Hathaway will not stand up to people who will break the law and crush human rights and will not do the right thing. Simply calling it hatred is not going to change the fact that we can hold two truths.
Guys,
We
yeah,
can
Mr.
fight
Hand, what are we
doing?
anti-Semitism, and we can do what's right for human rights.
Mr. Hathaway, you get a chance to respond.
Yeah, Ms. Mejia, I'll stop calling you an anti-Semite when you stop saying things that are anti-Semitic and when you stop taking money from people like Yusra Hussein and Sakid Badi who shout that Jews in Israel are the same thing as Nazis in Germany. You take money from these people, you support their policies. It is completely out of touch with this district that has a thriving Jewish population. This isn't a district where you can make those kind of comments and people are going to be okay with it. That's why we're seeing mass migration from your Democrat campaign into our common sense platform, because the Jewish people of this district know there's only one candidate they can vote for if they care about their safety and their children's safety. And it's not you, it's me.
Again, I think that these accusations are not only like beneath the office of Congress, but also beneath the office of a city councilman, a mayor, or anyone of good conscience. We should be able to criticize the actions of a government without being called a person of hate. Am I exhibiting hatred of the United States when I say Donald Trump is committing violations of the Constitution? It is unconscionable to say that we have to give a blank check and turn a blind eye to Benjamin Netanyahu, who just yesterday passed a law in which is only targeting Palestinian people. Again, we could be able to support freedom and protect our nations without turning to the very thing that we say we fight against. We have to uphold human rights. And if that's the worst thing that I could be accused of, then I will stand with it, because I believe we have to fight for the freedom and justice of every human being.
Anti-Semitism is a bad thing to be accused of. It is.
That is why I am disgusted by the fact that you are unable to see that criticism of a prime minister does not equate hate. It is disgusting and it is beneath you. But again, we can continue.
All right, Jeannine, we will move on to our next topic, although I think that there will still be plenty of room for disagreement on these future questions. But Jeannine, now to you.
Yes, so we're going to stick a little bit about the military. Ms. Mejia, as a member of Congress, you will be asked to vote on the most solemn of responsibilities, the authorization of military force. Under what specific conditions, if any, would you support deployment of Americans' ground troops?
Well, let me start by what I wouldn't support. I wouldn't support illegal and endless wars. I wouldn't support to go into war without a plan to keep Americans safe. I wouldn't support the idea of just bumbling in like we have. Now, here's what we need to be able to defend. We have to make sure that we're upholding democracy, that we're upholding the safety of the American people, and that we are standing with our allies. I will point to that in this moment, the Republican Party, Donald Trump, and people like Joe Hathaway are doing the exact opposite. This war is, in fact, increasing the power of enemies of democracy. We have lifted sanctions on Russian oil, providing them a windfall that they're using to further crush and further intimidate Ukraine. We've told our allies across Europe that they have to stand alone because we will not stand with them. I believe that we have to fight nuclear threat, but more bombs do not equate peace. We have to ensure that we've exhausted diplomacy and sanctions to keep Americans safe. Again, I think human life is valuable.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway.
Well, sure. Look, if we're talking specifically about Iran, I mean, I've been clear on this from day one. You know, I am of the opinion, under no circumstances can Iran be allowed to have a nuclear weapon or have the capabilities to create a nuclear weapon. And look, I would love to see diplomacy work if our military believes that action is needed to ensure that that doesn't happen, and I support it. And by the way, I think we've been incredibly effective in that mission up to this point. Right, we've seen our air superiority, our drone superiority, neutralizing sites, neutralizing enemy forces, and hopefully, according to Secretary Rubio, right, looking like the end is coming close. So I hope that is the case and that we accomplish this mission very soon. I certainly don't want to see us have to put boots on the ground. I think we're doing a very effective job through the air, and it's important because our allies in Israel are at stake. It's American lives that are at stake. And again, in this race, as we just talked about, Ms. Mejia's position when it comes to the state of Israel really renders her completely unable to make the right decisions for America, for our allies in Israel, when it comes to a nuclear-capable Iran.
So I'm going to do a follow-up for this one, Mr. Hathaway, and it's a more general question, still dealing with military, not necessarily with Iran, but just going to war. Let's hypothetically, and I know we don't like hypothetics when we're doing debates, but hypothetically, you're sitting across the table from a mother or a grandmother, and I happen to be both, who has a child or grandchild in the reserves. What is the star principle you would promise her you'd follow before putting her child in harm's way?
Well, look, I think when America leads, through military strength. I think the world's a safer place. I think our men and women in uniform are the only reason for that. They are the backbone of our strength, of our dominance around the world, and of American prosperity. And I honor every single servicemen and women and their families for making that incredible sacrifice. And listen, I trust our military leadership to make the right decisions on behalf of our country and our safety. So, when we see things like what's going on in Iran, we believe we have the ability to ensure that we're keeping Americans safe, keeping our allies safe. And let's be real, a nuclear armed Iran is a threat to the entire world. So keeping the world safe by engaging militarily to stop this kind of regime from engaging in nuclear war manufacturing, I think that's a good thing. And I think our servicemen and women are protecting American people when they do that.
Follow up, Ms. Mejia?
Bottom line is that I would tell families we've exhausted every other avenue before we put your families at risk. The truth is that's not what has happened in this moment. I would say that we would fight, that we would ensure that we would not pay the ultimate price recklessly. Unfortunately, that is what has happened in this particular moment. Donald Trump has very clearly lost interest in democracy, in Ukraine, in our European allies. Without those kind of allies, we wouldn't be able to actually build the kind of peace and protect the American people. Again, my opponent would love to distance himself from someone that he has supported lockstep. But the truth is, we are in a more dangerous situation now because we have allowed this administration to act recklessly, and the price is paid by those very families.
Right. So we have now reached the portion of our debate where both candidates will get to ask a question of one another. Each candidate will get 60 seconds to answer the question posed of them, with any further follow-ups being limited to 30 seconds each. Ms. Mejia won the coin toss for this and has opted to go second. So, Mr. Hathaway, we will start with your question.
Thank you, Joey. Ms. Mejia, you have spent this campaign trying to hide and run away from your progressive socialist agenda, because I think you believe, because you know that this is something that our district believes is inherently anti-American. You've backtracked in your alignment with the Democrat Socialists of America Party, and even though you've been endorsed by its most prominent member, AOC, specifically because you support government-controlled healthcare. My question for you is, if you are not, in fact, a socialist, how do you justify your comments previously that Jesus was a socialist, and that people who don't support socialism should not be allowed to use parks, roads, or toilets?
Okay, well, first and foremost, let's start with the last point first. I would say that I believe that we have to have the kind of government that looks out for human beings. You asked me a question about Jesus. I'll tell you this. In Luke chapter 8, verses 43 to 48, Jesus speaks about women's health care. In John chapter 4, verses 5 through 30, Jesus speaks about protecting immigrants. In Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44, Jesus speaks about feeding the hungry. In Matthew 25, verse 35, he speaks about caring of the poor. In Matthew 25:36, he speaks about the incarcerated. And most importantly, in John 13, verse 34, he speaks about loving each other like we love ourselves. The policies I speak about are about focusing on human beings. It's not about left or right. It's about right and wrong. I believe healthcare is a human right. I believe that we deserve equal justice. I believe that we need to fight for human rights. At every turn, I believe that we should be human with each other. And again, if you find that so offensive, then what can we do? I also will remind you.
Ms. Mejia, Ms. Mejia,
can I finish this one sentence? I've been
One
endorsed by
sentence.
carpenters.
This is like the fourth sentence.
By machinists. I've been endorsed by teachers. It doesn't mean that I'm a carpenter, a machinist, or a teacher. It just means that my policies find resonance across community.
Okay, Mr. Hathaway, if you'd like a chance to.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, look, let's let the record reflect that Ms. Mejia doesn't have an answer for why people who aren't socialists should not be allowed to use parks, roads, or toilets. Yes, this is a congressional debate, and yes, that's the kind of questions we're asking in this race, because that is what one of our nominees believes. She also mentioned things like women's health care, immigration, supporting jobs, supporting Social Security, public safety, and bipartisanship working together as things that Jesus believes. Guess what? I believe all those things too, and I am not a socialist. So I think this idea that Jesus was a socialist because he believes in things like women's health and immigration reform does not hold water whatsoever. Again, these are the reasons why this debate took so long to bring about in the first place, because Ms. Mejia knows these ideas are completely out of touch. She knows it, and she doesn't want anyone to hear it. This is a prime example.
Actually,
Ms.
I'm
Mejia,
happy.
Ms. Mejia,
I'm
in the
happy
interest
to
of
let
time,
people know
we're
what
not.
I believe.
Ms. Mejia, we're not going to be able to do too many back and forth on this.
Okay,
So
great.
we're going to go to your question for Mr. Hathaway instead.
Sure. I will say, however, I answered the question, but here I go with Joe's. So you have repeatedly tried to present yourself as a moderate and distance yourself from Donald Trump. So I'm going to use a little bit of a Donald Trump test. Who won the 2020 election? Would you have voted to certify those results? And if Donald Trump tries to steal a third term, can you tell us what you're going to do to stop him?
Joe Biden won the 2020 election. If Donald Trump tried to run for a third term, which is against the U.S. Constitution, I would push back in every single way allowed for me by law to do so, Ms. Mejia. That is what it means to be a common sense next generation Republican. These aren't the conversations that I believe we should be having anymore at this point. And I understand why. But we have to focus on the things that are most important, right? We have to acknowledge those things, that Joe Biden won the election and that Donald Trump and any American president needs to serve 2 terms. Now we got to move on and focus on the issues that matter, on the things that we can actually get done. This is what happens when you focus on ideology and trying to placate to a radical ideology fringe of the party that has supported you in the primary. That is not the kind of leadership that we need in Washington. It's not the kind of leadership that our district needs. They need someone who's not going to be a rubber stamp for the squad or a rubber stamp for the president. They need someone who's going to put their values first.
Again, you know what's interesting to all who are listening? It took Joe Hathaway all this time to be able to say what is plain and evident. But the bottom line is he's only doing that now because he's trying to lull you into thinking that he's a common sense moderate. But here's the truth. Joe Hathaway, when I was fighting for raising the minimum wage, Joe Hathaway was helping Chris Christie spin Bridgegate. When I was fighting to ensure that your families had justice in the workplace, Joe Hathaway was fighting to keep affordability out of your home. When I was fighting to ensure that every vote would count, he was silent because here's the truth. In the end, if you send Joe Hathaway to Congress, he's going to vote like a Trump. He sounds like a Trump, and he'll just be more Trump.
Listen, I got to add just one thing here, right? Because Ms. Mejia is saying, I haven't talked about it at this point in time. Let me give you a great example. A few weeks ago, I was in a meet and greet in South Orange recently, about 2 weeks ago, with about 30 Democrats who asked me every question under the sun because they're afraid of what your positions and platforms are going to mean for them. And they wanted to know if I was someone they could trust out in Washington. They asked me questions for about 2 hours. You know what they didn't ask me? Questions like, who did I vote for? Or was Joe Biden elected? Right? They wanted to know where I stand on issues, to see where we agree, where we disagree. And we agreed on some and we disagreed on others. But you know what? They knew I was someone that said what I believed and would put our district first. When Republicans are having meet and greets in South Orange with that many Democrats in the room, Ms. Mejia, it doesn't bode well for your campaign. It bodes well for the broad coalition we're building, and that's why we're going to win on April 16th.
Again, this fear-mongering is, you could try it all day, but here's the bottom line. Your actions speak much more than your words. You can say that it is radical to believe that people shouldn't ration their medication, their insulin, or that they shouldn't have their health care. You could say that it is radical to invest in public education or to teach history because it happened. You say it's radical to say that people shouldn't exercise their First Amendment rights and that it is okay to be shot in the street by rogue agents. I mean, again, your actions show a level of radicalism that is shocking, and yet I'm going
to have to cut you off there. I'm sorry. We do want to get to a few more questions before the debate ends.
Yes.
So I'm going to flip it over to Micah for another question.
Yes, this is a question for Ms. Mejia. In light of yesterday's executive order, is this the last election in which Americans should trust and rely on the post office? In other words, can we trust that our mail is not being screened or intercepted based on whether we appear on a federal list or our voter registration matches our birth certificate?
My concern around the way this administration is playing with not only surveillance and our data goes way beyond. I am afraid that our government is overreaching to levels that knows no bounds. I believe that our Congress has to take actions to protect the integrity of not only our post office and our systems and our structure, our government, but they have to protect our individual identity and data. I feel that we are missing the boat on many of these policies. It's why we're fast tracking data centers, we're fast tracking AI, but we're not paying attention to the price that regular Americans are going to pay with their freedom. I would say that I am troubled about many of the steps that this administration is taking. And when I'm in Congress, I will fight. I will fight to protect your data. I will fight to protect the integrity of our government. And I will fight, frankly, Donald Trump. I know that, again, these are not normal times, and we do need to send a fighter to Congress to stand up for us and what's right.
Mr. Hathaway?
Yeah, well, hey, look, and maybe this is an area where Ms. Mejia and I find a little common ground, right? Look, I think generally speaking, the federal government should be less involved in people's personal lives and their personal data, certainly when it comes to something like the U.S. Postal Service. And I think Ms. Mejia brings a point up, right, where you see this moving more and more into the digital space, into online. And look, I'm a dad with little ones at home. I know Ms. Mejia is a parent as well. And I think that also extends into the social media space. And we need to be doing things to make sure that AI and these algorithms that are, addicting kids to social media and I think going way, way too far there and leading to self-harm and other really bad situations needs to be curbed. People have a right to their individual freedoms. They have a right to their own data and their own safety. And I think our kids, we need to be fighting for them as well as we see this new kind of technology coming into play. It's Congress's job to set those guardrails and make sure that we're protecting individual data and protecting our kids online as well.
All right, I am going to jump back in, and this question will go to Ms. Mejia first again. So under the big, beautiful bill signed into law last year, the state and local tax deduction cap was increased from $10,000 to $40,000 through 2030, which eases the burden on taxpayers in blue states like New Jersey, especially higher income taxpayers. So do you support keeping that higher cap past 2030? Are there any changes you would seek to make to the way that this SALT deduction works?
Yeah, I am in favor of ensuring that tax fairness is actually tax fairness. I had mentioned before that the big ugly bill, frankly, ended up being a large transfer of wealth from the working class, the middle class, to the very top. As I mentioned, we have SALT tax deductions that were increased, but they end in a cliff in 2030. The temporary reprieve on tax on tips is also going to fade away. I think that we have to fight to restore tax fairness so that the wealthiest amongst us are paying their fair share. It's not right that middle class families end up paying a larger percentage of their income on taxes and are getting less out of their government than the billionaires and corporations. I would fight for tax fairness. I would fight for the SALT tax deduction to be permanent. I would fight for energy tax credits. I would fight for ACA tax credits. And what I would push again to restore the smart tax policies that allow our government to function. Again, it's $3 trillion deficits that we have created just to give billionaires another tax cut.
Mr. Hathaway, on the SALT cap?
Well, look, I like seeing the SALT cap increased, being quadrupled. I'd like it to be gone completely. I think that's what our district needs. I know Republicans in my party were initially the ones who put the SALT cap in place, and I disagree with that too. It's bad for the district. It's bad for the everyday people here in New Jersey, right? But when you talk about this district and the burden of taxes that we already are being crushed by here in New Jersey with our property taxes, our state and local taxes overall, right? When you run on platforms about things like socialized medicine that raise taxes and spending by trillions of dollars, when you run on socialized education where the government decides who goes to college, who doesn't, where that money is going to go and how it's going to be allocated, is only going to crush this district even more. Remember, it may not feel like it, and I know it certainly doesn't, but NJ11 is in the top 2% of the wealthiest districts in the entire country. So, Ms. Mejia, when you say things like the wealthy are going to be the ones to pay for these programs, my question to you is, do you realize that your district is going to be the one on the hook to pay?
Well, since you asked me that question, I do realize that in New Jersey and in New Jersey's 11th, as I said, we have multiple social strata. I want to point something out. We eliminated the estate tax through the big ugly bill to just 4,000 families. We eliminated trillions of dollars in tax cuts to just the 0.1% and the 1%. This is a newsflash. In all of New Jersey's 11th congressional district, there are more people who were hurt by the big ugly bill than benefited from that big bill. The bottom line is that real tax fairness should be fair. I am an advocate of not taxing the first $40,000 in income. Again, allowing everyone to get a little bit of a tax break. I believe that we should restore.
I'm going to cut you off, but I've got a question that I think you're going to.
The question that I was answering.
You were
I've got a question for him that I think you're going to
minutes.
like me to ask him, which is the one big beautiful bill that or the big ugly bill, as Ms. Mejia calls it, that's come up repeatedly. You know, it put in this SALT cap hike. It also made some prior tax cuts permanent. It reduced funding for Medicaid. It increased funding for ICE. It made a variety of other changes. Mr. Hathaway, if you had been in Congress at the time when this bill was going through, would you have voted for it?
Well, I would have, because once again, it was the largest tax cut in the history of America. And every single family in our district is going to be feeling that in one way or another. I mean, we expanded the child tax credit, right? As for anyone who's a young family, I don't care where you are on the social spectrum. If you had a child, you're going to see a greater deduction allowed in your tax bill, right? If you're a property owner, you're going to see your state and local tax deduction be
temporarily.
Okay, so listen, Ms. Mejia, you yourself said, let's not let good get in the way of great here. We want to see progressive improvement here, all right? This is what it takes to move the ball forward, to make life more affordable in New Jersey. I hope to go to Washington and institute some more policies like freezing taxes for first-time home buyers, putting money back in their pocket during that critical moment so home ownership can be more affordable. Remember, the whole average age for home ownership right now in New Jersey for a first-time home buyer is creeping up around 40 years old. We got to get that number down. I think a common sense way we can do that is by not sending more money to Washington, by putting money back in people's pockets when they're trying to raise their family and plant their roots.
Ms. Mejia, I'll give you last word on this.
I just love that it only took me an hour to get Joe Hathaway to say that he believes in progressive ideas. Here's the bottom line. When I go to Congress, I will fight for working families. The truth is that you are paying more because in this last year because of Republican policies and that big ugly bill. Again, we talk about tax fairness, but it is a bait and switch, my friends. Again, the most wealthy in America, the top 1 and 0.1%, got close to $100,000 in tax breaks. The average family in New Jersey's 11th got about $1,900 in tax breaks. But you know what else you got? Gutted Medicaid, gutted no more ACA tax credits, no more energy tax credits, an increase in gas bill. Again, you are paying more, but they're telling you that somehow you're better off by giving billionaires
Joey,
almost
what are we
$100,000 in
doing?
tax cuts, and you get pennies.
How much longer are we going to let this bell ring 3, 4, 5 times here, guys? Come on.
Well, so we're on the very end here. We're going to go to Micah for a final question or two. So Micah, you're up again.
Okay. This is about infrastructure. So the question is, and I think it's for Mr. Hathaway. What can you do to ensure that federal funding for the Hudson Tunnel project is not a political football for the next 10 years?
Oh, Micah, man, you're hitting the nail right on the head. I mean, look, this is a critical project. It's probably one of the areas I've been most vocal about during this campaign. The president has to stop playing games with something as important as this Gateway Tunnel project funding for us. It's too many jobs. It's too many commuters. Our district's a big commuter district. It's way too many commuters. And, you know, this is an area where I've been very clear about the need for this funding. And we need funding across the board when it comes to our infrastructure. It's a major platform for us in this campaign. We need to improve New Jersey transit by expanding one-seat ride options to and from New York. We need to also be investing in our roads a whole lot more. I know a lot of us here in the Morris County area will remember the brutal sinkhole situation we had last year. We need to be bringing federal dollars back up to New Jersey to pay for those. But look, we're only going to be able to do that if we're willing to come to the table and work together to get that done, right? And again, I think you've seen time and again during this debate, especially who the loudest voices are in the room shouting on the left, and who are the people willing to come to the table to work together with anybody to make sure this project gets funded and make sure New Jersey has fair representation down in Washington.
Okay. Ms. Mejia?
Well, again, it's fascinating to listen to my opponent again swish around with the facts. Here's the bottom line. The Republican Party and Donald Trump played politics with your commute. The bottom line is that we not only have to restore gateway funding, but we need to make sure that we have multi-year funding that guarantees this project runs smoothly. It is important to the union members who are building it, to the commuters who are going to benefit from it, and the employers who are going to have a more reliable workforce. I'll also add that, Mr. Hathaway speaks about the investments that he was able to make on roads. Those investments were brought to you by the actions of the Biden administration. I know, I was there. We fought to ensure that we, through ARPA, IRA, IJA, that we were investing in our communities. Again, when we are able to work together and focus on people, we do better. But the truth is, Republicans focus on corporate tax cuts, on billionaires, and then they take credit for the accomplishments of Democrats.
Ms. Mejia, let's go back to you.
So the last question I have is,
Since she brought up my record here in Randolph, can I speak about that for a quick minute? Very quickly, 30 seconds.
We'll give you 30 seconds.
Because look, ARPA funding didn't fund not one single road in Randolph Township. What funded roads in Randolph Township was prudent use of tax dollars here in Randolph Township by our council that has delivered one of the lowest per capita tax rates in the country. And what improved safety, long overdue safety on our roads across Route 10 was bipartisanship between me as the mayor and Governor Murphy and his DOT to get things done that are making our community safer. That's what can actually happen, Ms. Mejia, when you have people who are willing to reach out.
Yes, when you have Democratic leadership.
Ms. Mejia, I have not interrupted you once, as you have spoken over and over, bell after bell after bell. The fact that you would jump in when I'm trying to talk about my record at the local level with my residents is a disgrace, and it is why you are unfit to run for this office.
I
Ms.
think your
Mejia,
anger is
given
showing.
the recent-
I will just say that
He's
what you
continuing to
mentioned
jump in,
Given-
guys. I mean, come
was
on.
Ms. Mejia,
that,
given the
uh,
recent
asking for a
fatal-
fair shot.
Democratic
Okay,
governor
everybody,
helped
let's let Mike ask his question.
Ms.
Forgive
Mejia,
me, I
given
was
the
just
recent
pointing out
fatal
what you
incidents,
said.
near misses, and FAA restrictions amid ongoing shortages of air traffic controllers and outdated systems, what can you do in Congress to ensure the safety of NJ11 residents when they fly?
That's a question for Ms. Mejia. I don't know whether you heard that.
Okay.
Sure.
So again, we need to ensure that we are in fact focused on protecting our American consumers, American people, our New Jersey residents. But here is how we actually do it. We have to ensure that we have a government that can actually function. We have to make sure that our budgets are a reflection of our values. We need to make sure that we are investing in not only our workforce and our institutions, our departments, but that we aren't playing politics with it. The truth is, Republicans have been playing fast and loose with the truth and playing politics with your daily existence, and it's costing lives. My opponent got very angry just a moment ago because I pointed out that when Democrats are in leadership, we end up actually investing in infrastructure and programs in our departments that make your life better. And when Republicans are in office, and this you can look up, you end up doing worse. Why? Because the first thing they do is give tax breaks to corporations and billionaires at your expense. We got to stop that. It doesn't make sense.
Mr. Hathaway?
This was a question about TSA, correct? About air traffic safety?
It's about how we ensure the safety of NJ11 residents when they fly.
Yeah, okay, because I didn't hear anything about ensuring safety of NJ residents when they fly. Look, I mean, again, this is why we need to be getting these programs funded again, right? We got to stop playing politics with something as important as American lives. We saw the terrible accident that happened over in LaGuardia, right? God forbid something like that happens again or again. We have to be able to come to the table. The only way to get these big bills passed, these big spending packages, right? These important things that are going to fund our government is a willingness for people who don't agree with each other to come to the table and find a path forward. All right. And with something as important as the lives of NJ residents who are traveling, who are, either driving to the airport, flying, whatever it may be, we have to prioritize the American people and the people we represent ahead of our partisan differences, because this is too important. It's too important to make sure that Americans are safe and that people in our district are safe.
All right. Thank you both for that spirited round of back and forth. We will now move on to our closing statements. Ms. Mejia, you're up first. So your closing statement.
All right. Well, I want to first thank you all for this evening, and thank you, Joe, for the spirited debate. I am running for Congress again, for everyone listening, because like you, I am very tired of the madness in our political system. I'm tired of the cowardice. I'm tired of the inability and the reluctance to do what's right out of fear or corruption. Like you, I know we can do better. I'm trying to raise my family in New Jersey's 11th congressional district, and I am finding it harder every single day because the policies of this current administration and its supporters, like my opponent, are making it harder for our daily life. Like you, I can see that Donald Trump may be one of the most dangerous presidents in generations, and the last thing we need to do is send him another yes vote to Congress. There are moments in time in which people of good conscience have to take a stand. They have to stand up for what's right, even if you're going to be faced by angry name calling. I have spent 25 years working on behalf of justice, of freedom. I've helped raise wages for millions of Americans and New Jerseyans, and I stand on principles. And if you pause to consider, you know you share many of these. Everyone deserves a shot. Healthcare should be a human right. People shouldn't ration their healthcare or their medication. We don't have to crush each other to get ahead. My name is Analilia Mejia, and I am a mom. I am a policy advocate. I'm an organizer. And if you send me to Congress, I am going to stand up for you because I know what's right. It's not left or right. It's right versus wrong. If you believe in that, join me. Go to my website, Analilia for J, and join us.
Mr. Hathaway.
Well, thank you to the moderators. Thank you to the Globe, Ms. Mejia. Thank you for participating this evening. For all the viewers, look, you just heard two very clear, very different visions for the future of our district and for our country. You know, Ms. Mejia was unable to say why Jesus is a socialist or answer questions about socialism or the people who bankroll her campaign that expose anti-Semitic values. We ran a campaign and a message tonight about practical, independent leadership and serving constituents with empathy and with humility. That's how I've governed already, because it's how I was raised by two parents who knew the value of hard work and service to others. Now, unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago, we did lose my dad. And as I think about his upcoming services, and I think about the folks who are going to be in the room, I think a lot about his old Army buddies who will be there. I'm sure many of them in their red Republican hats. But I also know his friends from community theater will be there too, who could not be more liberal Democrats. But they're both going to be in the room because my dad was someone who cared much more about the kind of person that you are over the politics that you believe in. He knew what was most important: your integrity, your honesty, and your willingness to put the needs of others before your own. My dad's character helped shape the man that I am. I hope it'll shape the congressman I become. And I can promise you that if I'm blessed to go down to Washington on your behalf, that I will remember my dad each and every time I cast a vote. And I will always, always put the needs of our district before anything else. I'm Joe Hathaway, and I humbly ask for your vote this April 16th. Thank you.
Thank you both. That concludes the New Jersey Globe's debate in the special election for New Jersey's 11th congressional district. Once again, election day in the 11th district is Thursday, April 16th, and early in-person voting will run from April 6th to April 14th. I want to thank both of the candidates, Analilia Mejia and Joe Hathaway, for participating. I want to thank my fellow panelists, Micah and Jeannine, for joining me on this. And I want to thank C-SPAN for airing our debate. And of course, thank you to everybody in our audience, whether you're tuning in live or watching this later, for joining us. Have a good evening.